Good evening, I'm Melissa Ridgen with your APTN News Weekend. After a video of a violent arrest by Alberta RCMP went viral, charges against Chief ALLAN Adam of the Athabasca Chippewa Nation have been dropped. Tamara Pimentel has that story.
This dash cam video of Chief ALLAN Adam's arrest on March 10 shows Adam being tackled by an RCMP officer. The incident occurred over an expired license plate. Police charged the Athabasca Chippewa chief with resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. Today, Wednesday, June 24th, those charges were dropped. The Crown announced they were dropping the charges because they weren't in the public interest.
I'm overwhelmed of the fact that the charges have been drawn because, we knew, my wife and I knew that we didn't do nothing wrong.
Adam called on the country to address injustices and police brutality against Indigenous people. He referred to recommendations from the TRC, including cross-cultural police training and creating an Indigenous police force. Chief Adam's lawyer, Brian Barash, says this case shines a spotlight on systemic racism that has gone unchecked for too long.
The Attorney General's decision today validates Chief Adams' view that the RCMP charges were laid as a police shield to their aggressive and abusive conduct, not a true belief that criminal activity had occurred.
On Twitter, National Chief Perry Bellegarde welcomes the withdrawn charges, but says it's clear racism is embedded within most public institutions, specifically police. In a statement, the Alberta Crown says it has no comment on the actions of the police as they are being investigated by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
In British Columbia, healthcare practitioners are under fire for allegedly playing a game similar to The Price is Right, but where they would guess the blood alcohol levels of some Indigenous patients. As APTN's Tina House reports, it's just one aspect of substandard care of Indigenous patients provided by healthcare providers.
It's been 2 years since MARCIA GUNNO's younger brother Preston passed away at the age of 49.
2 years ago, Preston was diagnosed with a very severe and aggressive form of cancer. And Preston lived in Prince George, and in the early parts of his illness, he went to the Prince George Hospital to seek treatment in emergency.
And that's where Marcia says her brother faced systemic racism in the healthcare system. Marcia says her brother went to that hospital between 3 to 5 times to try and find out why he was in so much pain, but was told to go home each time and that nothing was wrong.
He let me know that on one of those visits that one of the questions that was asked of him was could his injury or his illness be part of possibly a sexually transmitted disease. At the time, Preston had aggressive form of cancer, and we later found out that during that time he had fractures in his spine and his hips, and it was incredible that he was still mobile and the warrior that he was, seeking treatment and walking around and trying to get help.
By the time he was properly diagnosed, it was too late. Ironically, Preston GUNNO was the provincial director of Indigenous cancer care with the Canadian Cancer Society at the time of his death. And according to many others, this story of systemic racism is just the tip of the iceberg.
What we notice is that Indigenous people are often asked, the first thing that they're asked is, how much have you had to drink today?
BC Health Minister ADRIAN says he learned of an alleged Price is Right game where doctors and nurses guess the blood alcohol level of Indigenous patients.
If confirmed, the conduct is beyond unacceptable.
The Métis Nation of BC is one of the organizations that brought this to the minister's attention.
This day and age, that we're still dealing with this type of racism to our Indigenous people, we always knew it was there. But to this extent is shocking.
The BC government has appointed former judge Mary-Ellen Turpel-Lafond to lead an independent investigation.
Clearly, if there's any workplace in British Columbia where people are playing games at the expense of the health or safety of Indigenous people, one can only expect someone in those roles to face severe consequences.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Many Indigenous people from across the Northwest Territories have to travel from their home community to deal with legal matters. For those on bail, the COVID-19 pandemic has left some stranded and unsure when they can go home. Our reporter Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs looks into several issues around bail in the North.
Will Steen is stuck in Yellowknife, awaiting trial in his hometown, the dry community of Tuktaktuk, Northwest Territories. He faces 6 charges from a night of drinking back home, breach of probation and assault, then assault and mischief when arrested and detained by RCMP.
Well, I had a criminal record since I was about 19 years old. Most of my charges after I got charged for careless storage of a firearm and careless use when I was young.
Steen was flown from Tuk to Yellowknife in August of 2019. He spent a week in jail and was released on his own recognizance in Yellowknife under the condition he'll avoid Tuk until court matters are settled. But he's unsure how he will even get up to Tuk for the trial there, and it's unclear when Circuit Court will be up and running again and when it will be operating at pre-COVID-19 capacity.
I was supposed to have an appearance date for August 12th in Tuktaktuk, but they wouldn't able to let me go home because these charges are still standing.
Steen's current charges came less than 2 months after he had been released from the North Slave Correctional Center in Yellowknife, having served 1 year for similar offenses. But his experience within the justice system mirrors that of many Indigenous people across Turtle Island. According to the Correctional Investigator of Canada, Indigenous people make up over 30% of inmates. Currently, there's 106 adult inmates in the NWT's 3 correctional facilities. Of these, 86% identify as Indigenous. Defense lawyer Peter Harte moved his practice to the North 15 years ago, but he still talks about the shock he felt representing clients with 6-page criminal records.
I think I can say that the vast majority of offenses on offender criminal records are breaches of one form or another of court order.
Steen turned down free accommodations at the Salvation Army in an effort to not breach bail by drinking, and he works construction to help pay for his family's home in Tuk and a tiny room in Yellowknife.
My hair is even falling out, like dealing with stress and anxiety and like depression, like being in a quiet place for days and weeks, just come home after work and no way to spend time with family.
Harte sees how Indigenous people from remote communities get into trouble when awaiting trial in Yellowknife.
Say Tuk, for example, you're released here, you've got nothing to do. There are maybe people on the street who you know. In fact, it's likely you're going to know people on the street, and so you end up chumming around with them, but that really isn't a very engaging activity. And so it ends up being a situation where in Tuk you could be hunting or fishing or finding wood or whatever to help your family, whereas here those opportunities to participate in your community are pretty limited.
There's also been confusion around a court travel policy which was updated in January, which deals with what flights courts will pay for when accused are released from remand.
In bail court, before a justice of the peace, you seek release on condition that the client reside elsewhere other than in the community where the offenses are alleged to have taken place. The challenge that arose recently in January of this year was that the court was only prepared to fly people back to the community that they'd been arrested in. So if you managed to secure release for your client in Yellowknife, the court would not return him to the community that he had been arrested in.
APTN News asked the Territorial Justice Department about the policy change. They replied that no staff were available to clarify. We were also told that the Justice Department doesn't keep records of how many people from remote communities are released in the capital city. Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
The Senate Ethics Committee's final report on Lynn Bayek is now out. The Ontario senator was suspended over racist letters that she posted on her website. But after 5 Senate reports and more than one attempt at an apology, many are now asking, has Bayek finally got it right? Here's Jamie Pashagumskum.
In their latest report, the Senate's Ethics Committee recommends that Lynn Bayek be reinstated as a senator. A previous report said the senator was to write a letter of apology and undergo Indigenous cultural sensitivity training, which she did. The report says, your committee identified in its interim report that further and particular training for Senator Bayek was necessary to improve her understanding of racism against Indigenous peoples in Canada. Your committee believes she has engaged in the required process, was willing to learn, and did indeed learn. Senator Murray Sinclair is the chair of the Standing Committee on Ethics and Conflict of Interest for Senators. He says education is preferable to punishment on the path to reconciliation.
Our obligation to the Senate and our obligation as Indigenous people as well is to work to bring that knowledge forward for them, but to give them the responsibility of deciding what they're going to do with it and to see what they do. If we continue just to yell at each other, to take acts of vengeance against each other, then there will be reconciliation.
Sinclair said the Ethics Committee is satisfied that Bayek has completed the required steps to be reinstated. He says written apologies need to be taken with a grain of salt. In her apology letter, Bayek said, it will be difficult to change entrenched attitudes and beliefs, but it can be done with love, communication, and respectful understanding. I have learned new ways of advocating that are tactful, compassionate, and respectful, and once again apologize sincerely and unreservedly for my hurtful actions and wrongful conduct. Bayek has 5 days to respond to the report. Then senators can vote on whether or not she is reinstated. Sinclair said the Senate would like to hold the vote once more senators have returned to active duty, as some have been absent due to COVID-19. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
After a delay due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Manitoba government says that they will end the controversial practice of birth alerts and replace it with new policy next week. Birth alerts flag certain mothers so that when they give birth, hospital staff notify child welfare authorities. It often leads to newborn apprehensions. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls cited these alerts as causing trauma to too many women and children. The province says that instead they're going to fund a program that's designed to help at-risk expectant moms called the Mothering Project. It will connect up to 200 mothers to health and wellness supports with the goal of keeping them with their newborns.
The Mothering Project and other supports available through public health, child welfare agencies and community-based organizations put the focus back on supporting parents and families to be safe and well together in our communities. CFS agencies will be able to refer more women to the Mothering Project, which further supports the shift away from the practice of birth alerts.
We need to take a short break, but coming up, a 60s scooped man meets his dad for the first time on Father's Day. Stay with us. Welcome back. Indigenous tourism across Turtle Island has felt the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic in the past 4 months. Recent research shows that the industry could lose up to 700 Indigenous businesses and more than 21,000 jobs. But as Brittany Hobson shows us, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada hopes to stop that bleed.
A new campaign developed by the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada is encouraging Canadians to explore their own backyards with the launch of Destination Indigenous. The online vacation planner showcases Indigenous experiences across Turtle Island. It was started in response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic.
We're trying to stabilize as many businesses as we can. Our goal is ultimately to help at least 600 to 800 businesses survive this.
Keith Henry is the association's president and CEO. The group has recently developed a 4-year recovery plan with the goal of rebuilding the Indigenous tourism industry.
We've created a strategy that's going to talk about recovery, resiliency, and then full on, back to rebuilding Indigenous tourism, back to roughly 1.9 billion direct GDP.
COVID-19 has forced the closure of borders and limited travel, meaning tourism businesses have taken a hit. A report released this month from the Conference Board of Canada estimates the sector will see $555 million by the end of 2020, down 65% from 2019. For the rest of the year, ITAC is putting the focus on promoting local Indigenous experiences.
It provides a platform that's safe for Canadians to want to just learn together, have fun, explore something for many Canadians, they don't even know anything about. And the more we know each other, the better place Canada becomes.
That's what David DALEY is hoping to rely on. DALEY owns several businesses in Churchill, including Wapuska Ventures, a dog sledding company.
I'm anticipating that our fall season will basically be gone, and we're just going to have to work at staycations with the Canadians here and try to get as many Canadians up to Churchill as we can to help us get through till next year, till tourism can return to somewhat.
DALEY, who is also the Manitoba director for ITAC, says about 80% of the people who visit are from the States. The federal government has provided relief funding for Indigenous tourism. DALEY received some of that and expects it will cover his businesses till the fall. Until then, he's keeping busy.
We're repairing dog houses and going through all our equipment and, just really taking the time to be ready. Like we want to, when this pandemic is over and they find a vaccine and our borders open again, we want to hit the ground running.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
On Father's Day weekend, a 60s Scoop survivor met his biological dad for the first time. James SAUVE-BIRD drove from Regina to Prince George, British Columbia with his son for the life-changing moment. APTN's Lee Wilson has that story.
The moment has come.
The moment James SAUVE-BIRD has been waiting for is the end of a long quest to connect with family. SAUVE-BIRD is Métis Cree, who as an infant was placed in foster care during the 60s Scoop. The journey to find his birth parents has been long, but he's found supports along the way. Nonprofit group 60 Scoop Legacy of Canada connected him with other survivors. 10 years ago, he met his mother as she's passing away in a hospital in Edmonton.
That's how I met everyone. And I went and met her, and we talked on her bed, and I just asked her questions about her life and who my dad was, and she said it was George Sauve, and I said, okay. I was like, awesome, thank you for letting me know.
Last year, SAUVE-BIRD decided it was time to find his father. He posted his story on social media with the name his mother shared. Someone recognized a similar face from his picture he posted and was able to connect him with a man in Prince George. That man was George Sauve, who had a child he didn't know from long ago. Sauve is married and has 4 other children. They talked over the phone. There was uncertainty at first, but the two established a connection. Over their months, they agreed to meet. SAUVE-BIRD, a single dad, took his son on a journey to meet his father for the first time. A 14-hour drive from Regina to Prince George for Father's Day weekend.
It was just nice to sit across from my dad for the first time. It was like, it's been 48 years, and we both looked at each other and like, wow, this is great. And he really had a good time. He enjoyed our time together at Father's Day. One of the best Father's Days he told me he had in a long time. And it's one of my best too. We look like twins.
SAUVE-BIRD was excited for the new connection with his father. And now he's building relationships online with other relatives. Along with his son, they'll visit family members from his father's and mother's sides on the drive back to Regina. New memories he believes will last a lifetime for the both of them. SAUVE-BIRD shared a message of hope for others in search of their families.
I want to tell my 60 Scoop group that even though I don't know you guys, I feel for you, I care. I'm hoping that your journey can be like mine. There's a lot of positives out there.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Prince George.
Extra special Father's Day for that family. Well, we need to take another break, but when we come back, how some grads are making the most out of a pretty bad time to be graduating. grad season has wrapped up, and many didn't get the send-off and celebrations that usually go with graduation, but that didn't stop some from enjoying their special day anyway, even if it didn't happen the way they expected. Beverly Andrews shows us how some celebrated.
Graduation usually comes with big parties and ceremonies, but not this year. The global pandemic canceled classes weeks early, and social distancing guidelines limit large group gatherings. But that didn't stop grads of all ages from getting their recognition.
Hi, my name is Kalina. I'm from Puckawakin, Manitoba, and I'm graduating to grade 1.
6-year-old Kalina Green School allowed the kindergarten grads to come and pick up their diploma, but parents had to stay at a distance. In Vancouver, instead of a big gala, grade 12 grad Skyla Charlie Boy's class was invited individually to pick up their diploma at the school. Parents had to wait outside.
I've been looking forward to graduating with all my friends and being able to go dress shopping and everything with my mom. And I was really looking forward to having a prom and a graduation ceremony, as long with a Aboriginal grad ceremony.
COVID-19 took Charlie Boy's last few months of classes and the big grad parties, but she says she's not done with grad yet.
Me and my mom were thinking about throwing our own grad party, and we're gonna rent out a boat and have all my friends and family to dress up nice and everything. And just
grad never comes too late. 68-year-old Lorna Thomas of Neskolith First Nation had to leave school when she was only 14 years old. She earned her high school diploma this year.
I never really had the chance to finish school, so I wanted to get it done.
Although she didn't get the big ceremony, the Neskolith First Nation arranged grad photos in lieu of the usual community celebration, and Thomas still got to celebrate her diploma in her own way.
My son, he had a barbecue for me and a few friends over. Then we went boating.
No matter how schools and grads celebrated this year, nothing can diminish their achievements.
I just want to say that I am proud of each and one of you. I know that this has probably affected a lot of you as well. And you know, the most important thing is that we finally made it and that we're all graduating still together.
Beverly Andrews, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new Nike ad campaign is highlighting Indigenous culture and beauty, and Canadian model will be front and center. Ashley Collingbull from Enoch Cree Nation in Alberta will be one of 3 people who will represent Nike's N7 shoe and clothing collection. Collingbull is a former Mrs. Universe model and actress. The collection celebrates Indigenous culture and heritage plants across Turtle Island.
It's beautiful that I'm a part of something so powerful, something that shares with how we're connected to the land, how we use traditional medicines, and how our culture is so vital to who we are. The fact that there's a really proud Indigenous representation in this brand, and even the people that made the designs, everything is Indigenous, and the money that goes back to the youth, it goes back to Indigenous youth. So it's Indigenous power everywhere you go in this campaign.
That's your news for this Saturday. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for joining me. Have a great weekend.